Welcome to Surrogacy as a podcast with just me and Casey here today, which is always really fun.
Doing our Misconception Series.
Yeah, and there's always something to talk about. What did we talk about last time? Compensation, what goes into the big numbers and how that all comes to be.
And going independent to do or not to do. Mm-hmm. This one is going to be surrogates give up the rights. And do they when they're doing this?
So I think a big fear that people have when they're considering surrogacy is like, do I give up all of my rights to make decisions for my body, for my health, for my family? Do the intended parents control my life? Do they take over everything and I have to do whatever they say? Can I still do birth the way that I want to?
Are they going to make me have an epidural if I don't want one? Or if I want one, are they going to say, no, you can't have an epidural?
Yeah.
And so we're going to go into that. And I think it's a really important topic.
And I think it's really interesting too, because one of the big fears that intended parents have going into surrogacy is that, and it's just the initial thought, that first layer of thinking of what if the surrogate changes her mind and she decides to keep the baby? And that's the big fear that intended parents have. Mm-hmm. And until you kind of get into it and you realize like, oh, no, surrogates, if they want to have a baby, they can do that. They can just have a baby. They don't need to steal yours. So it's really the last thing on their mind. But what's funny is on the flip side of that, surrogates often have this fear. And I had this fear because I was done. I didn't want any more kids. Like, what if I'm pregnant? We're going along, and then the parents change their mind and they don't want their baby anymore. Am I going to be stuck with this baby? That's a fear that surrogates have. So when you realize that those are the two fears, like, oh, okay. Everybody's going into this for very different reasons.
Yeah. I mean, the reality. So when the parents are saying this, it's like, well, first of all, let's talk about the fact that there's going to be this legal contract in place. So the legality side of it, if you will, is that there is this contract saying that you're choosing to have a child through surrogacy. A gestational carrier will carry your baby, and embryo transfer will happen. But this baby is yours, and there will be this legal contract saying that. And that's why all of the steps are done. That's why we want to make sure that the surrogate has a good support system, that she's psychologically cleared, making sure she's got financially stable, making sure that it's healthy and safe with her last pregnancies to pursue surrogacy. But that's why all those pre-screening things happen, is so that when you get to this legal contract, that everybody understands that we've signed it, and we understand that this person understands what they're signing and is ready and understands the seriousness of this process. So that's that side of it.
Our intention today was to talk about how surrogates don't give up their rights, because they don't. Like, you do have rights as a surrogate. Yeah. You have rights to choose who you match with. You get to know who your intended parents are. You have a right to say, I want to know that they passed a criminal background check. I want to know that they met with a psychological professional and that they understand what they're getting into on this journey just as much as I do. Mm-hmm. And I want to know that they are financially capable of funding this entire journey. And I want to know that the escrow is going to be completely fully funded with all of my compensation, all of my estimated insurance and medical bills, and extra for all the just in case what ifs if things go wrong. I want that escrow fully funded prior to starting medication. And you have a right to ask for that.
And not only do you have the right to ask for that, you want to make sure it's in your legal contract that you're signing. So that's the other key, is you can say all these things to your agency, but it's really important to understand that that's what your contract should reflect as well. So the flip side, the surrogate says, well, how do I know that the parents aren't going to change their mind or go through a divorce and decide, you know what, this is too much? Let me just tell you what goes into this process for these intended parents. If they're coming into this, their intent is they want a baby. Financially, this process with the legal contracts, with the IVF, with the agency finding a surrogate, insurance, life insurance, all of the things that go into this, you're looking at this process right now is between $150,000 to $200,000, depending on if it's a first-time surrogate, experienced surrogate, where she's located. But this process is not cheap. So these parents aren't going into this like, I think I want a kid. No, you have to identify, if something were to happen to you as an intended parent, who that next of kin is going to be. And that's going to be in your legal contract. So the intended parents have to have identified, if God forbid something were to happen to them, they get in a horrible accident and pass away. What is the likelihood of that happening? Slim, but there is still a possibility. And that's why that's in that contract of identifying who is that next of kin. Because if you were to carry this pregnancy as a gestational carrier, that contract is still explaining that the parents biologically are these intended parents. So they don't just get to change their mind. They are biologically these intended parents' baby when that baby is born.
And it's not your baby. Even if, say, something happened, the baby doesn't go to the surrogate. So there have been cases where I've heard some nightmare stories where there's an intended parent that's in China. They pay for everything. They do it all. They do the whole thing. And then the baby comes out with a cleft palate or, something happens. The baby's not physically perfect. I've heard of this happening at agencies that I worked for in the past where the intended parents were like, I don't want this baby because in their culture or whatever, it's not what they want for their family. Whatever reason, however we feel about it, doesn't matter. It happens. And so then what happens to that baby? Does the surrogate then get to keep the baby? No, she doesn't. The baby gets into state custody. So the baby will be taken into foster care and eventually adopted out, which happens really quickly for an infant because there are a lot of people that are eager to adopt an infant through foster care. Yeah. So when I was working with foster care, when we were going through that process with our daughter, fostering to adopt, I did know another foster mother who had actually adopted boy and girl twins that were in the NICU that were abandoned by their Chinese intended parents. And she adopted those babies. And she was so excited to have them. But it's just wild that those things do happen. Yeah. Which is why it's so important as a surrogate to know who you're caring for and what they are looking for and that your values are aligned.
And I will say this as a disclaimer. I've been doing this, well, my surro baby's going to be 15 next week on the 30th. So that's how long I've been doing this. And that is beautiful. But I've met and talked to thousands and thousands of women. I've never actually met anybody in person that has gone through that. It's just that you're in the industry, so you know, and you've heard other professionals talking about it. So personally, I've not seen and heard of this happening, but I do know that it happens. It's just not as common, right? It's that very sliver of a possibility. And so it's really important to, as you're entering into this process, do ask questions and make sure that you are understanding who it is that you're caring for.
And you do have a right to ask those questions and to verify. So the other thing is like, okay, ask the question, sure, but also validate the responses. Yeah. Because I was speaking with a surrogate the other day and I told her, this agency that you're looking into, I don't trust them. They have a bad reputation. I don't think you should move forward with this, but the compensation that they're offering is really high. And so people are tempted to look the other way on those things. And so she's like, I asked her, how come your business isn't registered in this state? And she says, oh, because I just moved to this other state. That's not a reason, but you don't know because like if you're asking that question and you don't understand, what are the chances this person's going to lie to you and tell you what you want to hear? Yeah. 100%. 100% they're going to lie and tell you what you want to hear. And they're going to say everything that they need. And you're going to say, they told me. Like, I'm telling you, they're lying and they're motivated to lie. Why wouldn't they? When the fake person calls you and wants to verify your credit card for this iPhone purchase, right? And you're like, but I asked them and they said they weren't a scammer.
Oh. Man, what? So glad I asked.
You asked them and they said they weren't and then they still were?
The other thing that surrogates come into this process feeling like, okay, are the parents going to have complete control over what I eat, what I do, how I deliver? And the reality is everybody comes into this process with a certain perspective. So the intended parents are going into this thinking, I have to trust a complete stranger to carry my baby. And if I was carrying my own pregnancy, I would eat this certain way, or I would use this type of cookware because I just want to make sure that I'm giving the healthiest opportunity for my pregnancy, et cetera, et cetera. Or if I'm a surrogate, I really want a doula. I really don't want to have been told that I need to have an epidural. Are these requirements? These are matching criterias and these are matching preferences. And so it's important to validate both sides of the story, right? We validate the surrogate and her feelings and what's important to her and the intended parents. As an agency, that's our job, right? That's the agency's job to hear everybody out, making sure that we're asking those thoughtful questions, making sure that's reflected on the profile so that as a surrogate, as the intended parent, you can see, do you align with this other person? And is this journey going to be equally invested in the same way of expectations? And then it's important to ask those questions on your match call. And then, like you say, trust but verify. It's important to make sure those things are in your legal contract, because it is important if you've talked with your surrogate and said, hey, listen, I would really love for you to eat organically, but I'm going to pay you for that, right? So there's going to be this reimbursement. As a surrogate, if you've decided, yeah, I'm willing to do that, that's great. I'd love to. It's just expensive. That it's in your contract reflecting that. Let's talk about this. Let's make sure those checks and balances are there, that we're saying the thing, but we're also protecting ourselves in that very, very serious, important contract that's going to take place and be put in place to protect all parties for this reason. And I think that's the key to all of this, is understanding that you have a voice. So ask the questions, but then make sure that that's in that contract, because this is a contract that everybody should be abiding by. And it's important that those things are there to protect all parties.
And then there are things too that like you can have really good intentions of doing. Like say you really, really want to have an unmedicated natural delivery. And the intended parents really want that too. And that's everybody's goal going in. But then you end up having back labor or something and it's really painful. And ultimately you're like, I know I agreed that I wasn't going to get an epidural, but I'm in so much pain.
Yeah.
It would be inhumane to deny you access to pain medication or whatever it is that you need. So even if you had contractually agreed to trying for an unmedicated birth and delivery, ultimately, when you're in the hospital, your care team, your doctor, your nurses, your anesthesiologist, you're the patient and you will decide.
Yep.
And the intended parents cannot tell you in that moment, and they can be disappointed and they can be bummed and everybody can be bummed. But if you decide ultimately, I need an epidural, you're going to get an epidural and your intended parents will not stop you and they will not be able to make that decision. Honestly, I don't think that they would even want to if you said that you need it. Hopefully everybody respects each other enough to say, yeah, okay, of course, I'm not going to try to torture this poor woman that's delivering my baby. But even if they did, even if they were so unreasonable, your doctor's going to listen to you because you're the patient.
So everybody's clear. The contract will say the intention of this journey is for the surrogate to have the parents in the room, for the parents to be able to see their baby be born. For the surrogate, she's planning to have an unmedicated cycle. But there's also that language that your attorney is going to add in there. But should something happen that is bigger than that, that's that gray area to say we're protecting everybody, to understand that that might not end up being what ends up happening. And that is okay too. So your contract will say that. It'll say the intention is this, and this is the hope. But where you really want to understand that legality of it is that it will protect you in saying, if that doesn't end up happening, that is okay too.
And just like with pumping, you can have every intention that you want to pump breast milk for 6 months and then you're done with your journey and you're pumping and you've never exclusively pumped before. And now you're exclusively pumping and you're like, oh my God, I'm getting up in the middle of the night to pump. I'm doing all of this. I can't leave my house for longer than this amount of time. This is really a lot. Maybe you can only do it for 6 weeks before you're like, okay, I have to tap out. I want my autonomy in my body back.
Yeah.
You can do that too. They can't force you to be like, nope, you said you were going to pump for 6 months. So get on that pump and, we're just going to force you. Like you can't do that to someone. So you don't have to worry. Like we have to honestly express our intentions.
Yeah.
But things can change.
Yeah.
Things in the relationship, things in physically how you feel, how you recover, how much it takes out of you. You're not going to be an indentured servant. And you're like, well, I guess I'm going to be hooked up to this pump for the next 6 months because I said I would. Nobody can make you.
Here's the other side of it. I'm going to share a different perspective for the intended parents too, because a contract might say, let's say you're single and you're entering into this process. You've decided, I'm intentionally single. I'm not dating anybody. I'm not planning to be sexually active. That's also going to be in your contract. It's going to say something along the lines as everybody is entering into this. The surrogate is not in a committed relationship. She understands that if she were to be in a committed relationship, that she needs to let all parties know, the agency. And then a surrogate might say, well, what's it to anybody? Why is it any of their business? And the reality is when you're sexually active with somebody, anybody entering into this process, they're going to have an STD screening, making sure that there isn't anything of concern that could be passed on through the pregnancy to this baby for the safety of the pregnancy. And make sure that this person that's in their life is a safe person that doesn't have something super serious on their history of domestic violence, whatever, right? So there's going to be language in your contract to say that if you fell in love during surrogacy and you weren't intending to, that it's really crucial that you're letting your agency know. It's really crucial that you're letting your intended parents know, because there will probably be some additional steps that you're going to be required to then jump through, those hoops that you're going to have to jump through before you're sexually active with this person, before you become in a committed relationship, to ensure the safety of the pregnancy. Now, that would be something you would be contractually obligated to adhere to. If that were to be you were in breach of that contract, what would that mean? That would mean that compensation that you have in your contract could be in jeopardy of that. And the reality of that, that's a serious contract, because they want to make sure that everybody's being honest and open, and that timing is right, and that you're financially stable, that you've got a good support system. There are a lot of steps involved in making sure this is right for everybody. So this isn't a little thing. This is a serious thing.
Such a good point. About another question that we had to talk about why it's so important to have access to your own legal and mental health support, and not to let an agency assign an attorney to you. Right. Because just like there are doctors who will prescribe, OxyContin all day long to somebody that doesn't need it, there's going to be attorneys that are going to do things that jeopardize their oath to uphold the law too. So you can have a quack agency with a quack attorney and a quack doctor doing all the wrong things. So you want to make sure that you're choosing your own attorney and not just going with one that's assigned to you by an agency. And that protects you so that you have, an outside party that's fully on your side to evaluate everything, because they could catch something. Yeah. Didn't we have a surrogate that came on board with us that she was actually at her IVF clinic for embryo transfer, and the clinic stopped it because there was no legal contract in place?
Before she came to us, as when we were Surrogacy as the advocacy, she had reached out and said her clinic had said, whatever agency you're with right now, you need to stop and walk away and find a new agency. And so thankfully she found Surrogacy Is, and we were able to help her. But yes,
she was about to have an embryo transfer without a legal contract in place. And thankfully that clinic caught that and did the right thing. But what if they didn't? I mean, maybe she could have ended up with that baby because it would have been hers. There's no contract in place saying it's not. There's no pre-birth or even post-birth order like planned on the horizon. Who knows if she was ever going to get compensated?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I know.
It's just nuts. So yes, you need your own independent, legal counsel
who practices our law.
Of course. So your agency is probably going to suggest a handful of attorneys to you, but you can also go online and look and find attorneys. Even on Seeds, I think they have a list of attorneys that you can find that are Seeds members. And if there's one in your state that you can reach out to and even get their advice if there's somebody else that they recommend, like if they're not taking new clients or whatever, which do your own, a little bit of digging on your attorney. Ongoing mental health support is also so important. I think any mental health professional is also going to be licensed, and they might help catch things too. And good agencies are offering ongoing mental health support beyond just your initial psychological screening, because there are psychologists or mental health professionals too that will clear anybody for surrogacy. And these quack agencies know these quack doctors and these quack attorneys and these fake mental health, or they're licensed, but they don't care. They're just collecting a check and signing on the dotted line. If you have a good agency, they're not just going to do your initial psychological screening. And a red flag, if you have a psychological evaluation that lasts like 20 minutes and they barely ask you any questions, be like, I don't know if that's good. Same with your attorney. Your contract review when you go over that contract, they should have fully read your contract and encouraged you to fully read it before you even get on that consultation. And going over it together should take no less than an hour.
Yeah, minimum.
And you should also have your spouse or partner, if you have one, with you to go over that legal contract. It should not just be you.
No.
Because they're going to be required to sign it too. So they need to be part of that legal contract review. Even if not for the whole time, even if just for the parts that apply to them, that's super important. And they are more checks and balances to make sure that you're not being taken advantage of in some way. Your attorney will catch things that maybe the intended parent's attorney is trying to sneak in there. Like maybe you're going to put a cap on your lost wages, or maybe they'll put something in the contract that says like, you can't switch jobs because they're using your health insurance. And if you switch jobs, then you're responsible for replacing your health insurance coverage that's going to be used for the pregnancy. That's not fair to the surrogate, because what if a new opportunity arises? You have a life and you have goals. If you have a new opportunity that's going to be a step up in your career or pay more money, and maybe it's not going to have the same surrogate-friendly insurance, that's a bummer for the intended parents, and it'll be cost for them. And that's something to definitely consider. But I wouldn't agree in your contract that you're not going to take those opportunities, because you never know when those opportunities are going to arise. And if you miss it to save somebody money on health insurance, and that could set you back for the rest of your life and your career.
Just for anybody who's new, kind of coming in and listening to this. So medical screening happens, you're matched first, and then medical screening happens, and then the legal contract happens. And you should be doing and having that contract completed and signed and reviewed before you start any medication. Before you start any medication, that escrow should be fully funded with the entire amount that you agreed on with your surrogate benefit package. But what I tell surrogates to do, and the intended parents, is to go through that contract, grab your surrogate benefit package, and line by line read that. I say grab a highlighter, a sticky pad, and we're talking a 30 to 40, 60 sometimes page contract. And that's how they should be, right? And they're going to have a lot of legal jargon that you're going to read and go, what the heck did that say? And you're going to have to read it a few times. And I would say, as you're reading it and you're confused, or you see that it is not matching what your benefit package is, highlight that, put a sticky note. And that way, when you're going over that with your attorney, you can go through those things and they can better explain, why does it say it this way? And your attorney, if they're doing it the right way too, is also going to have reviewed that before they get on with you and have their list of things that they want to bring to your attention in suggesting making those changes. And that's for both the parents and the surrogate, right? We go a step further at Surrogacy, which I'm really very proud of, and I don't know of any other agencies doing this, in that we have a team in-house that will review the agency agreement the parents signed, that will review the surrogate benefit package that the parents and the surrogate signed against that contract, and what our requirements are as far as escrow being fully funded, making sure that there is that language in there to protect all parties. After that first draft is done, that draft gets sent to us, the agency, and we're going to go through and look at it and make sure that everything that we all said and agreed on from the start at that match is reflected in there. And if it isn't, now we're bringing it to the surrogate's attention and the parents' attention to make sure that everybody is on the same page, that here's what we all agreed on. I don't see that this is in here. And then they can work and decide if it's really, truly important to them or not. And if it's part of our agency agreement, we're pretty firm, and we do require that that legal contract says escrow is fully funded. So you want that in your contract and clearly written in there so that everybody sees it.
Yeah, read it twice. If anything is vague in the language or confusing, you can ask your attorney to sharpen that language and make it more clear and less vague. Look at your travel restrictions and things like that. I think some of the things that you might not have autonomy for as a surrogate that can be frustrating is regarding travel out of state after you get to a certain point in the pregnancy. So there will be travel restrictions as far as how far you can be from the hospital where you're planning to deliver, where your parentage order is in place, and all those things are just super important. But say you have a death in the family or something, and there's a funeral that's out of state, like your intended parents can choose to grant you an exception in writing for you to be able to do that, but they can also say no. And you have to honor that. And that's hard. So be mindful about that.
Here's why. It's every state has different laws with surrogacy. Most of them are surrogacy friendly, but the reality is that contract is going to be drafted, whether it be a pre-birth order, post-birth order. The insurance that's purchased for the surrogate is going to be insurance. If you were to leave out of state and use the insurance, it might not be in network, right? And so it's really important that if you were to leave for an emergency, that you're not delivering in this other state, that this post-birth, pre-birth order has been established, because then now we have a concern with parents getting parentage and being on the birth certificate, making sure that the insurance is surrogacy friendly. It's not as though they're just trying to be hurtful and say, sorry, we're so close to delivery, you can't leave. It's for a reason.
It's about protecting their parentage rights. It's about costs exploding exponentially because you deliver at an out-of-network hospital, and maybe they were planning for that total bill to be $15,000 and now it's $75,000. If you deliver early and baby's now in NICU in this random state that you were traveling to, and they have to uproot their life and be there until baby is released.
Yeah.
That's an important consideration.
And it's not for the entire pregnancy also. Just, again, to be clear, it's typically about 32 to 34 weeks getting towards the end that they're going to have that language. Usually at 26, 24 weeks, they'll say they don't want you leaving past 100 miles from your home for the safety of the pregnancy. But at the very beginning, it might just say, hey, if you have any travel plans, you're letting the agency and the intended parents know so that they're aware, but that you can still do that travel.
Mm-hmm. As long as you have permission from your doctor that it's safe for you to fly. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about?
Medical decisions, that's a good one. So how do medical decisions get made? I would say typically the contract is going to say that the intended parents are going to be very involved in that decision and being able to make the decisions for their child. If you're with your OB, who you love your OB, but they've established that there's something wrong with the pregnancy, your intended parents might say, I want to get a second opinion. Or maybe the doctor thinks everything's fine, but the parents are concerned. They might want and request a second opinion. And that's going to be in your contract, that they have the ability to have that right to have a second opinion, to make sure that they fully understand the circumstances of whatever findings it is. So the parents will have a say in just a care for their child and the pre-screening items that might take place, or the second trimester screening process.
The first trimester testing options, the NIPT, all these things that they might want to do. And then, of course, for the pregnancy, if they want to do a test, you do the test.
Yeah.
Something that's common in IVF pregnancies, it's like a more thorough ultrasound where they measure the growth of the baby's heart, and it usually do it around like 28 weeks, I think. I forget what they call it.
The anatomy scan?
So they do the anatomy scan at 20 weeks, but then they also do a more intense heart scan. I forget what it's called, but it's something that they recommend.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my doctor recommending it in my last journey, and my intended parents had the right to say, yes, we want to do that, or no, we don't. And of course they wanted to. They want to do everything that they can, because and also it's another opportunity to get a lot of really cute, sweet pictures of baby in utero and a little heart.
Yeah.
Make sure that's all developing properly. All that testing, I think, is up to the intended parents to do. But as far as decisions about your own health, that's going to be your decision, I think.
And that contract will say, there's privacy that's going to be put in place of, like, if you're in an appointment and there's language in there so that they don't just willy-nilly get to come in and be like, okay, I'm here. There is language in there to explain the circumstances. We're dealing with humans, and we can't anticipate or predict how this journey is going to go and the relationship's going to develop. So I think it comes down to making sure you understand that contract, because it'll explain what everybody's intentions are. And it's just really important. We work with some really great attorneys, in fact, and there a lot of times they'll say, we really appreciate when your surrogates get on with us, because they have a long list of questions and they've reviewed that contract, and they have seen in their years of experience working with many different agencies, some of these surrogates come on and they're like, okay, where do I sign? And then the attorney will say, did you review this? Did you read it? And they're like, no, I'm ready to get going. I'm ready to get going. Because they're focused on getting that compensation and starting this journey. These attorneys are like, no, we're going to reschedule this. I need you to read this contract. So those are the attorneys that you're looking for. You want your attorney to have what's best and what's going to be safest for this process. And that is understanding what your contract says, because there are contracts that are written that are a little funky.
Even if you have intended parents that are super involved and want to come to all of your doctor's appointments and are able to come to all of your doctor's appointments, that's amazing. Even if that's the case, your doctor is still going to want to have an opportunity at every visit to speak with you alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so there will be that period where you first come in and you meet with the doctor, and then they say, okay, now your intended parents can come in. Or now you can FaceTime your intended parents, but first I want to go do your vitals or whatever and chit chat with you a little bit. And then, okay, you can bring your intended parents in. So it's never like in a hostage situation and you're like, your captor's right over here. And you're like, how's everything? Fine. You know, it's fine. And you're like, help me.
Yeah.
You will have that opportunity to talk to your doctor and your medical team alone. And they'll always be like, are you okay? What's going on?
Yeah. And
my doctors always were. They always were like that with me. Like, are you okay with her being in here? Are you okay with this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I want her in here. Yes. Yeah. This is her baby. This is her appointment. Like, I wish she could be here and I didn't have to be, honestly.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to ask me questions or tell me something that I'm like, it's not relevant to me. It's their baby. It's not relevant for me.
Yeah.
What testing do I want to do? I don't know.
Ask them.
It's not my baby, ask them.
Yeah.
And I had appointments too where the doctors just like really didn't want to include my intended parents, and they were not like very accommodating of letting me FaceTime with them during ultrasounds or things like that. And that was really crappy. And I think in cases like that, what do you think, Casey? If the intended parents are having a hard time connecting with a doctor and they decide that they want you to see a different OB, I think we've seen that happen. Mm-hmm. How have you seen that unfold? If the surrogate loves the doctor, but the IPs don't, then what?
So there's a couple things that I always try to explain to the surrogates. And we've built this into our process early on into intake because, again, I want to start preparing everybody, intaking our intended parents and intaking our surrogates, to start thinking through some of those questions of, have you identified who you want your doctor to be? And if their answer is like, yes, it's going to be the same doctor. I delivered both of my kids. I trust him. Okay, great. Now here's what I want you to do. And when you go to your doctor that you trust and ask them, have they worked with a surrogate before? And what do they think about surrogacy? Because in that moment, you might be super excited about surrogacy, but you also might find that this doctor is completely against surrogacy and has an opinion about somebody who's being a surrogate. Has your opinion changed? Because maybe it has. And the reality is you want to have somebody that is cheering you on, who's going to support this process, be respectful of you, not judge you, but also be respectful of these intended parents. Maybe it's a same-sex couple too. So I take it a step further. If you have it on your heart, you want to help a same-sex couple, I want that for you. But a question that you have to ask that sucks in this day and age is asking your doctor how they feel about that. Because again, you don't want these intended parents to be disrespected because who they've chosen to love. So the reality is, at the end of the day, you want to ask and know that your doctor is for surrogacy. And same thing for the parents. The parents might already have it on their heart, like, I've already done all this work. I've done research. I want the very best of the best. I would love for my surrogate to be working with this doctor that I trust. And then that's a matching criteria. So that's going to the surrogate and saying, do you have a preference? If you don't, here's this really great doctor that they've chosen. That's a matching point, right? That's going to be in your legal contract. So it's really important that you're asking those questions because they're going to be addressed. If your agency is doing it right, if you've got a good attorney, those are things that should be talked about.
Big if.
If.
I think it's so helpful for us to have these conversations, Casey, because I hope that people who are just starting to research surrogacy and learning about the process will spend some time listening to some of these podcasts and go through our YouTube, go through our surrogate course. We put so much love and heart into that course. It's 130 lessons, not written with ChatGPT. I have to tell you, I'm so proud of that. Like, our team wrote this and revised it and edited it and coordinated with all of our teams, our journey coordinators, our matching team, our intake,
our professionals,
everything, attorneys. to make sure that the content of our course is accurate and validated and up to date, and we tweak it and add to it and edit it and will all the time. And it's a free resource for anyone, whether you're going to go through our agency, even if you're going to go independent, even if you're going to find another agency. Every agency is going to do things a little bit differently, which is not to say wrong. Do I think Surrogacy is the best agency?
Yes.
100% yes, because we get to make the decisions on how things are done, and we're really intentional about that. And we're always being like, okay, what more can we do? What more support can we offer? What more security can we provide to our clients? We know that about us, but there are other agencies that do that too. There really are other really great agencies. There are not a lot, though, honestly. I think there's a lot more bad than good. So having that to validate, go through that course. It's not going to take you forever. Spend a week, go through it. And then when you start researching and you start talking to agencies, you'll know what questions to ask. Like, what's your policy on when you fund escrow and how much? Do you have professional liability insurance? How long have you been in business? Who's your owner? Who owns this agency? What's their history? Oh, they're in private equity? Awesome. What do they know about surrogacy?
How many journey coordinators, how many cases is your journey coordinator going to manage? Even down to those little things, they're so important because that's going to determine how that journey goes and how supported you feel,
What type of ongoing mental health support do you provide? Not just for the surrogate, but for the intended parents too. Because having your intended parents be well supported before the journey, during and after is so key, because then they're not going to be maybe trauma dumping on you as things trigger. Like, because as the pregnancy will progress, things are going to get triggered for them potentially based on what they've been through that led them up to coming to surrogacy for family building. And they need an outlet and someone to talk to. And if the agency is not providing that to them, your case manager is not accessible and they don't have mental health support, it's going to be on you to manage those feelings. But also you're trying to carry a pregnancy. So you can't be that support person for your intended parents. It's just really important, I think, that you have a good understanding of what you can expect and what you can ask for, and to be empowered with knowledge.
That's what we're trying to do, is create an ability for our parents and our surrogates to feel empowered. We're actually working on the IP course that we are as intentional as we were with the surrogate course, because what we realized as an agency is there are not a lot of resources for these intended parents. And it is heartbreaking because a lot of these agencies from the outside with their makeup on look beautiful. And then when you see them without any makeup on behind the scenes, but you've already paid them the agency fee and you still haven't been matched, and the surrogate isn't passing medical screening, they don't all shake out the same. And so it's realizing that these intended parents don't know what they're looking for either as they're entering into this process. So figuring out, how do we better prepare even these intended parents to make sure that they feel supported and not taken advantage of by an agency in this experience? So we're working really hard.
It's very easy and very possible to be exploited and to be taken advantage of, both as an intended parent and as a surrogate. Unfortunately, I think the United States is the best for surrogacy as far as protecting from exploitation and having some established guidelines. I know it's becoming really popular because surrogacy is so expensive for people to look in other countries, like a lot of Latin American countries and the country of Georgia, or, now that Ukraine is a little bit less desirable because of the war. It's just really scary. On top of learning all the ins and outs of surrogacy, you're going to try and learn that or go through that process or trust it in a whole other culture, maybe with a whole other language, maybe with women that are being recruited for surrogacy that are much more vulnerable to financial exploitation because of their desperate third world situation that they're in. You don't want your child's story to be that you exploited somebody for them to come into the world. I'm sure that there are programs in Colombia or Mexico or whatever where there are women who are qualified and able to move forward with surrogacy out of their own volition and not because they're being financially coerced or because they're desperate. I do know you'd have a much easier time identifying that if you were meeting your surrogate and speaking the same language and understanding her culture. You might not be able to tell if somebody's being exploited if they're Colombian and they have a handler that's translating for them.
One of the guidelines for the American Society of Reproductive Medicines is financial stability. Why is that? Because you don't want to have being coerced into this process, right? So surrogacy is we are verifying income. We're not just saying, are you on government assistance? Check this box, yes or no, right? It's let's have you update and share with us your pay stubs for you and your partner. Let's understand how many people are in your household. Let's understand and make sure that you're financially stable so that you don't go into this process with one thing only on your mind is, I need to do this because I'm financially strapped right now. Right? We need there to be that financial stability, just as important as making sure you're medically cleared, just as important as it is to make sure that there isn't anything in your background. Why we do a home visit. We do these things because we want to make sure it's safe for her. She's a mom first. We want to make sure it's safe for these intended parents and this sweet child that's going to be made from surrogacy, right? That, to me, those are our priorities. And it's why we do what we do. Surrogacy is beautiful, but it needs to be done the right way.
A lot of these agencies that have popped up that have been exploitative that I've been reading about and learning about as I've gone down this rabbit hole these last couple of months is they are always happy to take advantage of women who don't actually meet the ASRM guidelines. Mm-hmm. Women that are outside of the BMI, women that are not financially stable, women who have had complications in their pregnancies that put them at high risk for permanent harm to their own body or even loss of their own life because they have had issues that make pregnancy unsafe for them. Those agencies don't care if you go home to your family. They're not invested in your well-being and they're not even necessarily real. It's like, I remember when Kyle was working in IT and I think of this metaphor for like how these things happen all the time too, because there was this old guy who had some scammers put some malware on his computer and lock it up. And they said, if you want all your data to be released or whatever, you have to give us iTunes gift cards, right? I don't know why scammers always want iTunes gift cards. I don't know what they're doing with these iTunes gift cards, but that's what they want. He goes and gets the iTunes gift cards or whatever and gives them to the scammer. They said that that's how he had to pay for them to repair this virus. He thought that they were helping him, but they were actually the people that were the scammers. And he was so mad when he brought it into San Diego Computer Help. And he was like, I paid these virus protector people all this money in iTunes gift cards, and they still didn't remove the virus. And they're like, sir, you know, you've been scammed. Like they weren't going to fix it. And he's like, no, they have to fix it. I paid them. I'm going to talk to their manager. I'm going to call their manager. I want to know who the boss is. Like, there's no manager. There's no boss. You were scammed. This was not a real company. And he's like, no, they're going to pay me back. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to go to the head scammer and be like, you give me my iTunes gift cards back. You know, like
the website's gone.
It's gone. They're not real. Yeah. Like it was so hard for him to comprehend that there are just people that are going to scam and take advantage. Mm-hmm. Like, no, there's got to be somebody that I can go to. But once you get in that situation, like these poor women with marked surrogacy or whatever pop up overnight, fake agency, these things happen with, there is no recourse for you. There is no intended parent for you to go after. There is no agency for you to go after. You were scammed, you know?
Yeah.
That sucks. So do verify that whatever agency you're working with has professional liability insurance.
Please.
Because should that happen, you want to be able to sue them and you want to be able to get something out of it. Really, you want to avoid being in that situation altogether if you can.
These ones are heavy. But you know what? They're necessary because nobody's talking about this. So I rather talk about the things that nobody wants to talk about because that's what we are trying to do when we even decided to be an agency. We did not have intention to be an agency. We are here because we saw that there was a need to do better. So here we are.
Don't want to scare people of surrogacy because it is so beautiful. I love surrogacy. I love what I've done. I love the families that I carried for. And I love knowing that these children are in the world and that they're being loved and that they're going to have the best lives with the best parents that love them so much. And I think anybody who signs up to do surrogacy should be able to have that same experience. Mm-hmm. And you can. It's just so important to take a step back and listen to your gut. You know, like how often have you, when you look back in hindsight, be like, there was this moment and this moment and this moment that I knew something was off, but I looked the other way or I pushed past it. And you remember all those opportunities where you had to like, why didn't I trust that instinct? You have to trust your instincts, but you also can't trust your instincts. I mean, you can't only trust your instincts, right? Because sometimes they might not go off. You have to just slow down and don't let your enthusiasm or your excitement for getting into this cloud your judgment. Because it's so important. It's such a big deal. It's not a small thing carrying a baby for someone, bringing life into the world for another family. There's nothing bigger. That's a big deal. So take your time, slow down, ask the questions, figure out what you're doing, who you're working with, and you won't regret that investment of time. But you might regret it if you rush.
I've yet to meet a surrogate that I've had the honor and we've had the privilege of helping in the years of doing this say, okay, it's done. I don't ever want to do this again. In fact, I have to tell them to slow their horses because they're like, when can I do this again? Because it was so amazing. And I watched my parents hold their baby and I felt like I had a superpower. I mean, the reality is surrogacy is beautiful. And it was a win-win. I got to help this amazing family, but I got to help my family too. And those are the things that are really neat about surrogacy. So I can tell you confidently, it is beautiful, it is amazing, but it's just stopping and taking a beat and start to do some research. And I hate that phrase, do some research, but I'm saying it because we've now given you an hour of research questions to ask, because I know that confidently, if we can at least spread the word of what questions you should be asking, what things you should be considering, you're going to be okay. But do the research in a way that, you know, ask questions.
Make informed decisions.
You got this.
That was good. I feel good. I'm glad we're talking about it. It does make me sad because I hate to imagine that I'm like talking anybody out of surrogacy or like scaring them away from it. That's not my goal.
No.
I just want people to be careful and be mindful and be protected. And I just hate that there are so many people that are suffering because they got duped. And it's not their fault. And I'm not blaming any of these victims. We do have a responsibility as surrogates and as agency owners, and we have a responsibility to protect this industry and to give people information and arm them with, you know, the education to make informed choices and have a beautiful, beautiful journey.
Yeah.
And just do this awesome magic. It's so magic. It's so good when it's good.
Yeah.
And I want to protect surrogacy above everything. That's my goal.
So stand behind us. We've got our armor and we're going to take care of you.
Till next time.